Getting engaged can be stressful. Getting the right ring won't be at BlueNile.com. The jewelers at BlueNile.com have sparkle down to a science with beautiful lab-grown diamonds worthy of your most brilliant moments. Their lab-grown diamonds are independently graded and guaranteed identical to natural diamonds and ready to ship to your door. Get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more with code SPOTIFY at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com, code SPOTIFY for $50 off.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
It's February, and that means Valentine's Day is around the corner, love is in the air, and the new Trump administration is causing stress with every new action. The best way to stay up to date on the latest news and breaking headlines during this turbulent time is to become a DSR member and gain access to additional content across our network, in addition to other exclusive benefits like an ad-free listening experience, exclusive content, access to our Discord community, and more. Use code DSR2025 to get 40% off of your membership and sign up today at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's DSR2025 at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. Thank you and enjoy the show.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. After Donald Trump and J.D. Vance ambushed Ukrainian President Zelensky in the Oval Office, one GOP senator stepped up and said the right thing. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska decried Trump not just for his appalling treatment of Zelensky, but also for realigning the U.S. with the rising forces of Putinism around the world. Meanwhile, European leaders are now stepping up to negotiate some kind of ceasefire plan for the end to the Russia-Ukraine war. We're hoping this could increase the pressure on Trump and Vance to show what they really want the outcome to look like, something they clearly don't want to be candid about. We're going to get into all of this today with Lauren Young, a lecturer on the global right and democratic erosion at Yale University. Thanks for coming on, Lauren.
Thank you very much for having me, Greg.
So by now, everybody's seen the video of Trump and Vance attacking Zelensky. They said Zelensky doesn't hold any cards right now and that he hasn't been sufficiently thankful to the U.S. for its support, which is appalling and complete fiction. And otherwise, they engaged in what was clearly a setup, an effort to show that under Trump and Vance, the U.S.'s support for Ukraine is in the process of getting withdrawn. Lauren, I just wanted to get your reaction to what we saw.
This is a tectonic shift in American foreign policy that we're seeing enacted in, to use Steve Bannon's words, with muzzle velocity. I mean, this is all happening very quickly. And I can't help, but think about Frederick Douglass in 1867, who made a statement that's quite prescient. And today, I thought after, what happened in the Oval Office on Friday, he said, "We ought to have our government so shaped that even when in the hands of a bad man, we shall be safe." What happened on Friday is a far more complex situation than the thuggery in the Oval Office meeting suggests. I think that while Trump voters might have broadly been in support of no longer funding a war in Ukraine, I don't really think that the majority of voters necessarily support allying the U.S. with Russia.
I think that's exactly right. They don't know that they were voting for this. Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska was perhaps the only Republican to really forcefully denounce what we all saw. She said this week started with administration officials refusing to acknowledge that Russia started the war in Ukraine. It ends with a tense, shocking conversation in the Oval Office and whispers from the White House that they may try to end all U.S. support for Ukraine. I am sick to my stomach. The administration appears to be walking away from our allies and embracing Putin, a threat to democracy and U.S. values around the world. So, Lauren, the key there is that Murkowski is calling out the broader reorientation of the U.S. Can you talk about that?
Yes. I mean, I think what she's referring to is the misinformation that was implicit in the meeting between Trump and Vance and Zelensky, and their tweets, and what this will do to embolden the right wing in other countries. And what we're seeing, I think, more specifically in Murkowski's remarks is the failure here, and perhaps in other countries, of the center right to draw a line in the sand. And maybe this Zelensky meeting will be seen as the moment when in Trump 2.0, the center right totally failed to stand up. I think she's describing a path that charts the end of what we know of as the Atlantic Alliance, this idea that we have allies in Europe and around the world whose goal it is to promote and protect other Western liberal democracies, of which the Ukraine is one example.
I mean, one thing that struck me about the ambush in the Oval Office is the audience for it. I'm not sure to what degree it was intended for an American audience. If so, it was primarily aimed at core MAGA voters. But that aside, it seems clear that one intended audience was the global far right or the global fascist movement, whichever you want to call it. How do you think this will be received by those rising forces around the world? What will they be seeing?
Well, I think they see a few things. I think for sure they see the end of what we have of 80 years of what we commonly refer to as the Atlantic Charter. This meeting showed a clear contravention of those understandings that have brought peace and prosperity to the growth of democracy in the world.
Well, Elon Musk, I think, saw it that way. Overnight, he endorsed a tweet calling for U.S. withdrawal from NATO. So Musk clearly sees that the Oval Office moment is a kind of coming out party for the global far right. Your thoughts on that from Musk?
Well, yes. So I think Musk in particular has been using Russian talking points for years. So his position on NATO isn't really anything new. Vance has done the same thing. Vance did the same thing in his attack on Zelensky in the Oval Office. But I'll say, and Vance was really interesting in that regard. You know, when Zelensky pressed him about having never visited Ukraine, Vance made some comments about how he consults the internet, and how that's been how that has informed his understanding of what's gone on in Ukraine. I'd say that he absolutely doesn't understand based on that, and clearly from the reception in the Oval Office, made that clear. So, for example, we have a wartime leader who was elected with a 73% approval rating. This is Zelensky. And who has clearly been invaded by a neighboring country. There have been war crimes. There have been huge losses of both civilian life of Ukrainian soldiers who fought very bravely on behalf of their country, and children kidnapped and forcibly removed to Russia. So there's a litany of things that Vance doesn't know about and Musk doesn't know about. Musk famously appeared just a few weeks ago at the conference of the AfD in Germany, and has promoted far right parties, as has Vance. Vance met with the Alex Vidal, the head of the AfD in Germany, when he was at the Munich Security Conference, famously not meeting with Olaf Scholz, who was the German chancellor at the time. So they seem to be, they seem to be coordinating with far right parties, in Europe in particular. What this leads to, I think, is and this galvanization of the global far right is really transparent.
Trump and Vance are never actually candid about what they actually want to happen in Russia and Ukraine. They don't want peace on any terms that require Russia to make real concessions. We never hear them calling on Russia to end its invasion. Now it's been reported that Britain and France will negotiate with Ukraine to produce some sort of set of terms for a plausible ceasefire and then present this to the U.S. There's a lot we don't know about this, but for now, should we at least hope that this process puts a bit more pressure on Trump and Vance to say what they really mean when they say they want peace between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I think, Trump and Vance are very transactional, and they want to deliver on a promise. And the promise was the fighting has stopped. Since 2014, Putin has violated any number of agreements with regard to Ukraine. So there's no reason to believe that the end of actual fighting in Ukraine will be respected as a red line by Putin very clearly.
Trump and Vance will take peace, quote unquote, peace between Russia and Ukraine, even if it constitutes essentially giving Russia whatever it wants and Ukraine not getting any of its territory back, simply because they can then say they stopped the fighting. I think there's that, but there's also a genuine ideological inclination on the part of Trump and Vance to want Russia to not have to make concessions. Can you talk about that?
So the idea of that we live in a transactional world. I'll take Greenland. You take Crimea. I'll take Panama. You can have oil in the Arctic Circle, and then we'll split the rare earths in the Ukraine. It's only fair. Everything's for sale in this transactional world. America is first. Russia's first. Hungary's first. It's the world is going back to a world before the First World War, where great power competition, dominated. But it's a flawed model. The past 80 years of Western liberal democracies has greatly benefited not only the U.S., but all the countries that have participated in it. This idea of ending the Western liberal alliances as we know it, which is really what we saw enacted in the Oval Office on Friday, puts us into a world that's far more dangerous and less secure. And longer term, it doesn't seem that this administration either appreciates that or possibly doesn't understand the ramifications.
Couldn't agree more. One thing that is really dark about all this is how few Republicans said what Lisa Murkowski said. Lindsey Graham, who's actually been very pro-Ukraine, claimed Zelensky had been disrespectful and said, I don't know if we can do business again. That's reprehensible. It's nonsense. But the broader point here, it seems to me, is that any hopes for having a robust center-right that might resist the Trump-Vance push to align the U.S. with global far-right forces is mostly gone. What does history tell us about the need for a center-right that acts as a bulwark?
Well, it is essential, without, mincing words. And it's funny, I've been teaching for the past 15 years or so, both in London at the London School of Economics and at Yale. And for the past 15 years, my favorite essay question for my brilliant future world leader students has been, what is the path back to the political center? And in 15 years, in England and in America, not one future world leader has ever taken me up on taking that topic to task and writing an essay about it. So this is the magic question. So without some sort of guardrails and some sort of some voices beyond the lone Lisa Murkowski speaking out, we're going to end up with policies that we're seeing now that align the U.S. with Russia. And it's time to speak up. This is a pretty serious situation, I believe.
It certainly is, and there is absolutely no indication that they are going to speak up. Lauren Young, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you, Greg.
You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler and the DSR Network.